Greetings and welcome to be my guest. Joining me today is Sangeeta Pradhan. Welcome.
Thank you.
Sangeeta Pradhan is a registered dietitian and certified diabetes educator for over 15 years. Diabetes coordinator at Charles River Medical Associates. She's the president of the Central Massachusetts Dietetic Association. And our topic today is a very interesting one. It is on nutrition. So I'm going to start off with I guess everybody will ask, what is nutrition? Can you enlighten us on what is nutrition?
Sure. Nutrition is a very broad-based term, but to put it in a nutshell, no pun intended, nutrition is sort of the sum total of all the processes by which we ingest nutrients, assimilate them, and then utilize them to promote good health and to promote, or I should say to support life itself.
So what are the benefits of good nutrition?
I wouldn't even know where to begin, Hamsha, honestly. The benefits of good nutrition are tremendous, starting with prevention of chronic disease, as well as perhaps altering the course of disease.
Right. So we talk about, maybe I'm jumping the gun a little bit, but we're talking about nutrition. So why are refined grains harmful?
Okay. So let me talk a little bit about what good nutrition really is. We talked about basic nutrition. So nutrition is the process by which we nourish our bodies. And good nutrition occurs when we truly and thoroughly nourish our bodies.
Right.
And to do so, you need nutrients. You want to ingest nutrients in their whole and unprocessed form.
So I guess that is the importance of nutrition as well, right? I mean, to be able to...
You want to ingest them whole.
Right.
And what kinds of foods are we consuming today?
Exactly. So that's what I was asking. Why is
highly
refined?
Which sort of loops us back into your question on refined grains and why are they harmful? Well, what happens is the grain, the intact grain, has an outer coating. It's called the bran, and it protects the grain. It's high in something called insoluble fiber. It also has B vitamins. And then there's a germ layer inside the grain that's very nutrient dense, and there's a reason for that. It's concentrated in nutrients because it supplies food to the growing sprout. It also has vitamin E, you've heard of vitamin E, healthy oils, antioxidants.
Heard of Who hasn't heard of antioxidants?
Exactly. They prevent oxidative damage, which sort of starts off chronic disease. So anyways, so you have this germ layer, you have the bran layer, and these are chock full of nutrients. And guess what is missing in a refined grain?
All the nutrition.
Yes, so the bran layer and the germ is stripped in the refining process, and what you're left with is the starch, which has some B vitamins, but it gets pulverized in a mill to create this superfine white flour. So what's the problem with that? The problem with that is that creates a greater digestive surface area for your digestive enzymes to work on, and therefore this starch is converted to sugar instantaneously. So what's the big deal? Well, that also means there's this rapid spike in blood sugar. The pancreas releases a large amount of insulin. It causes a crash. So the pancreas produces insulin in response to a spike in sugar, because insulin is the hormone that lowers your blood sugar. But the higher the spike, a proportionately large amount of insulin is released from the pancreas, causing a crash. And I think that creates that all too familiar sort of snack attack, if you will, making us very hungry, tired, and then you're either feeling really tired, drained, or you want that candy bar. So either way, that's very counterproductive to eating well. So that is one of the problems with refined grains. It's almost like we are eating the hollow shell of the food that our ancestors ate.
Right.
So that's one of the concerns.
It's not just processed grains, it's processed foods
overall. So foods that have, one thing I might advise our viewers is start looking at the ingredient list. Look for foods that start with whole grains as the first ingredient. Look for the fiber on the nutrition facts label, and also try to avoid foods that have a list of ingredients that looks like a chemical cocktail, if you will.
Oh yes, and what you can't pronounce too.
Yeah, if you can't pronounce it, you may be better off putting it back on the shelf.
That's a good point. So then, you know, now that brings me totally into the next topic, you know, obesity. And so what are the secrets of weight loss? I know there's no real secret, but let's see if you got something.
You said it. So the secret to weight loss is there is no real secret. It's all about eating well. It's not about eating less, contrary to popular belief. Counterintuitive as that might sound, when your meals are skimpy, if you go for long periods of time without eating, if you skip a meal, it can absolutely work against you. When you go for a long period of time without eating, a hormone called ghrelin is released by the body. This is your hunger hormone. So the longer you go without food, ghrelin begins to peak, and it will come to a point where you're ravenous, you're just going to end up overeating. On top of that, it also enables fat storage in the body, and you can see that that can be completely counterproductive to your weight loss efforts. Well, that's one tip. Wait, are you looking for more? I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you.
No, that's all right. You know, it's, you know, we're talking about from obesity, and one of the things that I think everybody is so aware of now is type 2 diabetes is one of the things that's comes to mind. Yeah.
Sure.
So, you know, what is type 2 diabetes, and can you briefly explain how diet, weight, and exercise can influence one's risk of diabetes?
Sure. So type 2 diabetes and obesity pretty much go hand in hand. Even a modest weight gain can significantly increase your risk of developing type 2 diabetes, especially if the weight gain is across the waist. So abdominal fat is a huge driver in increasing your risk of type 2 diabetes. So type 2 diabetes is because of a combination of a couple of factors. Folks with type 2 diabetes have something called insulin resistance. What that means is that the body does not utilize available insulin to bring down blood sugar. But basically what happens is, as we gain abdominal fat or as we gain weight, as well as when we get more sedentary, this excess abdominal fat, in a way, blocks insulin from getting sugar inside your cells.
Right.
So blood sugar goes up. Well, if blood sugar goes up, that sends a signal to the pancreas asking for more insulin. But every time you spike, you're going to keep releasing more insulin from the pancreas. Over time, combined with a sedentary lifestyle and the consumption of refined grains, here we go again, and the increased glycemic load on the pancreas. Not to mention foods that are high in fat, especially saturated fat, that basically creates a perfect storm for setting the stage for type 2 diabetes. Because if you keep demanding more and more from the pancreas, you know, so to speak, eventually over time the pancreas gets exhausted and you see the overt manifestation of type 2 diabetes. You also asked about exercise. How does exercise play a role, and how does exercise lower your risk, correct? So what happens is, when you're exercising, think about what happens when you're taking a brisk walk. So your muscles are active, and active muscles need fuel. And they get fuel from sugar in your blood. So as you walk and you're pumping your arms, or it could be that you're dancing, it doesn't matter. But those muscles are actively working and they're pulling sugar out of the blood.
But for that child that is listening, that 10-year-old that's listening and says, oh, she said sugar, we need to clarify. It's carbohydrates, that not the refined sugar, right? That
no, I'm talking, right, but I'm talking now, we moved from food to what's happening in the body.
I understand,
So the exercising muscles will pull glucose,
right.
is the other term.
Yes, which is the last part of your process of...
Correct. So what happens is foods break down, carbs turn to sugar, right? So when you're exercising, the exercising muscles need fuel, and they're going to get it from the sugar in your blood. So that pulls the sugar out. Your muscle cells absorb that sugar from your blood, and right there you're going to see a drop in blood sugar, correct?
Correct.
So the more you exercise, clearly that will lower blood sugar, but that also means you are not taxing your pancreas, and you are in a way preventing your risk of long-term risk of diabetes. But there's something else that's happening that perhaps folks may not be aware of, and that is that exercising muscles require less insulin too. They require less insulin. So again, you're not draining your pancreas, so to speak. Can you see there's a deeper significance?
Yes.
Besides the fact that it will burn fat, build more muscle, all of that reduces the insulin resistance that I had referred to earlier
on,
just now.
Yeah, well, like, you know, I feel like I just jumped in while you were giving a very nice explanation, but I just didn't want that little child out there to say, oh, Mom, I can go for sugar.
Oh, not
so,
at all.
You know, we're talking nutrition here. So
I think that was appropriate, Hamsha. I think that was appropriate. We do need to make that clarification.
Yes, you know, and this is where whole grains come, you know, whole grains eventually.
Right. So may I explain?
Yes, please do.
So what
we're talking nutrition after all.
Yes. So whereas your refined grains cause a quick spike in blood sugar, whole grains are chock full of fiber, and fiber slows down the process of digestion. And the reason is because we don't have the enzymes to digest fiber. Because we can't digest fiber, the body works harder at breaking down foods that are high in fiber. So instead of seeing a spike in sugar, you see a more even and slower, more sustainable release of glucose, sugar into the blood, right? So right there, you drop your blood sugar, but also you get fuller.
Yes, you do.
And more satisfied.
You don't get that afternoon slump, or you don't feel sleepy, or
there you go.
Depression doesn't set in.
There you go. You're on a more even keel. You have more energy. It's more sustainable. And like you said, you don't get the afternoon slump. It's because of fiber's benefits. It slows down digestion, but also the other thing that fiber does, which is really exceptionally important today, is that it binds with toxins. It binds with substances that your body doesn't really need. It even binds with cholesterol and excretes it from the body. So essentially it cleanses you.
Yay for whole grain, yes. So I know we touched this on a little bit, you know, to get into what is, talk about nutrition deficiencies. So,
okay,
I mean, we started off a little bit, so if you can just...
Sure. So when we think of nutritional deficiencies, today we think about, well, is that like an iron deficiency, zinc deficiency? Well, that can occur. But what we see sometimes in practice is because of all these misguided notions that folks come with, and partly that could be because of stuff they're reading from the internet that might not be a credible source. We have a lot of folks coming to us that I see in my practice that have eliminated carbohydrates, they have eliminated fat. So let me talk a little bit about nutrient deficiencies that can occur if you follow a let's say like if you try to follow a fat-free diet, you need a certain minimal amount of fat in the diet to meet your nutrient requirements. And that minimum amount is you need at least 10% of your calories from fat in order to prevent what's called an essential fatty acid deficiency. We've all heard of omega-3s and omega-6s, right? So what's interesting about them is your body can't synthesize, can't make omega-3s and omega-6s, which means you must obtain them from your diet. And if you do less than 10% of your calories from fat, it's very likely that you may have an essential fatty acid deficiency. And these omega-3s and omega-6s, they regulate important functions in your body such as blood pressure, blood clotting mechanisms. So in our quest to lose weight, it's very important that we keep these macronutrients, carbs, proteins and fats in the right proportions in the body. You need fat. You don't need a staggering amount, but you want approximately 30% of your calories from fat, and try not to go below the 10% for the reasons I just described.
And don't go over.
Well, yes, of course.
Also, I mean, we're seeing a lot of that.
Well, but it's when let's just say you need, let's just say as an example, if an individual needs 2,000 calories a day and they take in 2,500, which is very easy to do in today's world of calorie-dense foods. Your body will take that extra 500 and it will go straight into the fat depots of your body, usually across the waist, which then again increases our risk of chronic disease. So overnutrition is a bigger problem today than undernutrition, clearly.
Well, when you talk about undernutrition, you can get, you know, it's such a vast topic. I mean, somebody could be looking big and everything else and still be undernutrition because they didn't have the right proportion of nutrients in their body, right?
Right. So that, Hamsha, would fall under malnutrition. So malnutrition is a catch-all phrase. It's an umbrella term for undernutrition, overnutrition, as well as imbalance of nutrients. The imbalance is what I just talked about, where you might have much higher amounts of one macronutrient and compromise the amount of another. Okay, so when we talk about malnutrition, it's possible that you might be malnourished, so to speak, because you might be over consuming certain nutrients as well.
Yeah, well, these days is a lot of everybody's talking protein, 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 but that's not the one all give all. I mean, it's needed.
The be all and the end all.
Yes.
Right. So protein, first let me just clarify. You do need all three nutrients. Your macronutrients are carbohydrates and they provide fuel to the body. Proteins are your building blocks. They allow your body to repair and rejuvenate its cells. And then you need fats for hormones, for the absorption of fat-soluble vitamins, and so forth. So you really need all three. These are your anchoring nutrients. The trouble arises when you start skewing proportions of these nutrients. It's advised that roughly 45 to 50% of your calories come from carbohydrates, roughly 30%, as I just mentioned, from fat, and the remaining perhaps 20% from protein. When we follow some extreme diet that throws out an entire food group and then jacks up proportions of usually proteins, you might pay a price for that. Because again, they all serve unique roles in the body, and when we skew those proportions or we throw out entire food groups, that's questionable.
Well, we're only talking about macronutrients. You know, we need micronutrients just as much. You know, I mean, the macronutrients are not going to work, or it's just on its own. So, do you want to touch a little bit about micronutrients?
So, micronutrients are, as the name suggests, or I should say as the term suggests, microscopic nutrients are food substances, again, that nourish your body and allow growth and allow all the metabolic processes to work well. So there's many micronutrients that we ingest from our foods. There's all kinds of minerals, but at the end of the day, when we eat whole foods, especially plant-based foods, that is not to say you can't have animal proteins. By all means do so. But plant-based foods just have a much higher concentration of phyto comes from plants, antioxidants, and you get a plethora of these nutrients when you eat whole and unprocessed foods. And these nutrients then work in concert with each other. And it creates something known as food synergy, where each nutrient by itself is wonderful, but when you put them all together in whole foods, they enhance each other's effects, so that 2 plus 2 plus 2, instead of adding up to 6, becomes 10. Right. And that's when you get the full glorious effect. So yes, we need macronutrients, but we also need the micronutrients from foods to really optimize health.
And I mean, certain deficiencies, I mean, now the big talk is vitamin D. You know, everybody knows what happens in lack of vitamin D. So that's a micronutrient.
Yes, right. So, and actually vitamin D is a hormone, and there's all kinds of evidence that's coming to light where deficiency of vitamin D has also been associated with chronic disease. And especially for those of us who live on the northeast corridor, because we get so little sunlight, we do end up with a vitamin D deficiency. So I would advise the viewers to get your vitamin D level checked, and you might need to get it repleted if you happen to be deficient.
And then you spoke about vegetarian earlier on, I mean, eating vegetables. So one thing that you can go low on is vitamin B12 is what they say sometimes.
In older folks, it's not unusual to see a B12
and the thing is,
deficiency.
You can still get them.
The grains that we have today, although they are refined, they are enriched.
Yes.
So although it's funny because you strip your grain of nutrients, but then you add them back,
right.
But not all of them. So they are enriched, and when you enrich grains, you end up adding back B vitamins, you end up adding back iron, and because for the most part in the developed world we have access to food, it's unlikely that you would develop a vitamin deficiency. Right. But again, in these refined grains, they usually don't add back fiber. So that's one of the shortfall nutrients that, in fact, the dietary guidelines there's a remark on that in the dietary guidelines, that fiber is a shortfall nutrient. So one thing I might recommend.
It's modern day, yes.
Yes, one thing I might recommend, if I may, is if you're a woman, you need about 25. I usually say 25 to 35 grams of fiber per day, and if you're a man, you need about 38 grams of fiber per day according to the dietary guidelines. And it's actually not that hard to implement once you know what foods to tap into.
Yeah. Well, that's where vegetables come in handy again. Beans?
Beans are a powerhouse of nutrients. Just a half a cup of black beans, chickpeas, lentils give you a whopping 8 grams of fiber.
Yeah.
So if you're a woman, you're a third of the way there. If you just have a bowl of shredded wheat for breakfast, that's 6 grams of fiber.
Oats. Steel-cut oats.
Steel-cut oats are fabulous. Again, it's a whole grain.
So it has the fiber.
Right. And guess what? If you throw a cup of berries, like raspberries or blackberries, that's another 8 grams of fiber. Okay, and then combined with the beans we talked about, you can see how very quickly your fiber intake will begin to add up. Include wild rice, that's 5 grams of fiber, or
red rice.
Red rice also gives you about 3 grams of fiber or so. More whole grain breads as opposed to white enriched bread. So once you know what foods to tap into, attaining your fiber goal is,
yeah.
I would say,
very easy.
It's relatively easy.
Yes,
it's relatively easy. And the best part I want to just mention, Hamsha, is that these foods are within arm's reach.
Oh, yes.
They're probably already in your kitchen cabinets.
It's just for us to make use of it, yes.
It's just understanding
Yes.
how to tap into them.
That is true. So, let me ask at last, what is the most rewarding aspect of your job?
So my goal, and indeed the goal of a registered dietitian, is to take this complex topic
Yes.
of nutrition and translate it into simple, practical, easy to implement messages for my patients. And the most rewarding part is when they actually implement
Oh, yes.
the recommendations and we see positive outcomes. It's reflected in their labs and the smile on their face itself. That's very rewarding. And so one could say that that's when my work becomes its own reward.
So, in the challenges?
The challenges are, it's very interesting. So we are in this information age, I would say, right? But there is so much misinformation out there.
Yes.
So folks come to us with all kinds of misguided notions about what good nutrition is really all about. So my challenge is to sort of help them wipe the slate clean, debunk the myths, separate scientific fact from science fiction, if you will, set the record straight, cut through all that clutter. So it can take me a while. 50% of my job is just dispelling those myths and just kind of telling it like it is.
And you do a perfect job is telling it as it is,
well,
like
I try.
it is.
I try.
Mean, people must realize, fad diets and things don't work. It's just eating regular whole foods. Well, thank you, Sangeeta. It's been such a pleasure today.
Thank you, Hamsha. Thank you for giving nutrition the platform it deserves.
Well, it's such a vast topic. So we just have to take a day at a time and, I hope that people get the message from what we're trying to do right here.
Well, it's a start.
It is a start. Yeah, it is a very, very important topic. So people should pay attention for sure, So the message here is portion control, eat balanced, nutrient-dense food, covering all food groups. The key is moderation, mindfulness, I think is very, very important, and consumption of whole foods, which is just as important. Sitting in front of the TV and eating is not mindful eating. If you just take the time and have family time together and concentrate on that food, I think, we'll be doing the world wonders. And our future generation will hopefully combat obesity.
Absolutely.
So please do visit Sangeeta's blog. She has a blog which we'll have on the website. It's Sangeeta Pradhan's nutritionist.wordpress. And thanks you once again.
Thank you.
And until we meet again, bye from your host, Hamsha Naidu.